Alright, so I've recorded several different video topics I could start with or talk about on my opinion on things, and honestly, they've been alright, I think, but at the same time, I'm just afraid to share them because I just feel like my opinions are really stupid. So, it's great that I'm talking in a video about mental health because anxiety and etc. So, I do deal with anxiety and depression. So I thought I'd make a video talking about those things on a place where I don't really have many people I know watching, because then I'll be a little bit more safer. And don't be like that person who's trying to call me whatever triggered special snowflake. No, I just don't feel like comfortable talking about my issues online very often. And it's something I struggle with daily. I can't even really talk to a lot of my friends about it. I only have a few people I really talk to about it. And I think that is probably not good because, I'm just really afraid of talking my emotions and etc. And it really just pushes me to be closed off from other people. And I think that has something to do with furthering illness problems. So, what I want to first talk about is stigma, because I think that it's kind of important. There's still stigma about things like depression. Even if we understand that depression, not everybody does either, that's the funny part I say this, but there are a lot of people that understand depression happens, because usually people get an episode of depression in their life. It just becomes a problem when it constantly happens, and I happen to have it constantly happen to me, so fun. But people have these preconceived notions, which doesn't make them a bad person, by the way, because people that think that the stigma is definitely bad people that have the stigma on other people are just wrong, because those people aren't bad either, by the way. But I do think that it is really a problem in a way, because we see depressed people as different ways. It has something to do with the people who do it for attention and self-diagnose too, because they'll see us as the general population of people who have it as attention seekers and fake, and that it'll just get over with in a few months. Even a psychiatrist I went to said that it was really just minor and that it'll go away in a few months. It's nothing more than teenage depression. But it's still going on a year and a half to 2 years later, So, yeah, she was not right by saying that. But, yeah, I did go to therapists and psychiatrists, not usually the greatest experiences, to be honest. And I think that the idea of that is really, really prevalent in our culture. That because of what we see or what we think is just definitely the way that it is, and it's not, because there are different types of depression. There are different types of things, and I think it becomes a problem too, because then people might have these mental disorders, and then people will think of it as just a case of the blues that's really heavy, or this person's just being a lazy motherfucker, that kind of idea. And it becomes a problem, because then people don't want to talk about how they feel, because they're afraid of being seen as lazy or just faking it, attention seeking. That's why you're cutting yourself, because you want attention. And yeah, that's how people will see it, and then they won't want to get help. And I think that's a really big problem, because you need to get help. If it goes untreated for too long, you can actually get worse and worse, turns out. I've had experience with that, and it's not good to get worse and worse and worse and worse, because it kind of fucks you up. Because believe it or not, mental illness affects your brain. Wowee, what a really wild concept. But yeah, with depression, I can't remember the exact muscles, so don't be mad at me, okay? I'm not a psychiatrist or anything. I don't study psychology. So basically, with depression, different types affect it differently, but basically these two glands in your brain that have to deal with emotion, one grows larger than it should and one grows smaller. That's essentially mainly what depression does. And that is a physical thing that happens in your brain that causes you to feel that way. So yes, your depression does have something to do with science, crazy stuff. But yeah, or just, and then also neurons and etc. They've been studying depression for years. We don't really understand it completely, but we're getting there. And I think that once we start to understand it better, that it will be a lot better. But yeah, I haven't really talked much, besides the anxiety video I have on my main channel, I haven't really talked to many people about my issues with it. But I've had depression issues since I was about 11 or 12, and that's been a couple of years, believe it or not, and I have had parts where there's literally 4 or 5 months with just not feeling anything like that, and then all of a sudden I get hit with depression, and it's just fun. It's like, oh man, when will I get out of this? Because like, when you have those times where you get relieved from it, you start to feel like it'll go away eventually, but it doesn't most of the time go away, just leave, unless you have minor depression and just a normal depression episode that we get 1 or 2 in our lives if we don't have depression. But it does come back. That's the misconception as well, and it's really not healthy to think of it as, oh, just go away, you'll never come back. It does. It does. If you have major depression, if you don't get help, the right kind, it'll come back, and it'll come back real hard and bite you in the ass. And that's why you can't just say, oh, I need to get rid of this. You need to accept it. I think that's what I have problems with, but it is important to accept it. And with anxiety, I've had that since I was about 13 and a half, 14. So not as long as depression. But once it came, oh man, it made it hell of a lot harder. You start to get anxious, you think that everybody is doing something because they don't like you, and it makes you start to spaz out like a motherfucker. And it causes you to be depressed. So yeah, great package to have. If you have anxiety and depression, good job. Good job. Because it really just amplifies the depression, etc. And then when people have suicidal thoughts, a lot of people construe that as insanity still, which is just wrong, because even people without depression can feel suicidal, which that sounds really weird, but yeah, it happens. People get super stressed out at work, and they just want to end it, because they have a bunch of problems happening, and they might not have depression, but it definitely can make them suicidal. And that's not normal, granted, because if people are starting to say that depression and anxiety are normal, no, they're not fucking normal, okay? It is an illness because it is an illness, and don't try and say that being suicidal is normal. It's not. But we should also not treat these people like monsters, especially with stuff like bipolar and manic depression, because that happens, and some people can't, like, control what they're like, and it makes people really angry with them, and that's just, it would really suck, I think. I haven't been diagnosed with that, so I do not believe I am that, but it does run in my family, and I've had people, obviously, in my life that have been bipolar, and they're, like, you know, really close. I'm not gonna say who, but yeah, you can't just judge that exactly. And I feel really bad because, like, I try to be really open to people who are bipolar, because it's got to be a real struggle to not be able to express your emotions what's considered the normal way and express yourself the way you want to sometimes. And even though I'm not, like, bipolar, I have irritability problems at times because the depression just gets to me and I become an asshole. And it's not an excuse, I don't think, but it does make you an asshole sometimes, and that's the real struggle about, you know, mental illness like depression. It just makes you an asshole sometimes, and you wanna, like, anxiety makes me apologize constantly, even if it's not totally your fault, and it really, really sucks in that way. And I think that some people construe it as these people, because of, for example, Columbine, those shooters, that one of them had major, I think he had, like, severe depression, and he never got the help that he needed properly, which sucks, because, you know, mental health programs, not good. They're not still. And back then, very bad compared to now, which it's not to say that it was horrible, okay, but it was pretty bad, because they just thought that giving medicine would solve everything. It doesn't. And that was a real tragedy that shows that we should, all these shootings and stuff should be a wake-up call, I think, to say, hey, maybe, just maybe, we need to pay more attention to mental health. And the other shooter was a psychopath, not a sociopath. Okay, there's a difference between psychopath and sociopath. A psychopath is somebody who has the traits and stuff from their birth, and a sociopath is somebody who has the traits, sort of, but they get it from a nurture versus nature thing, and social and environment and stuff. So yeah, he was a psychopath, and the other one had severe depression, and they didn't get enough help. So they started, you could tell this also by the fact that before they were getting in trouble, psychopaths and stuff essentially have problems with juvenile delinquency and issues like that, like getting arrested and stuff. And I think that these also should be signs that people don't notice. There's signs of mental illness that show up physically as well. Like, appetite changes, and I think that a lot of people have to be more aware of the symptoms, because if you just leave somebody on their own, they might not go for help. They don't want help. They just want to wallow in their depression, and it seems like that, but that's just kind of how the depression works at times. It wants you to stay sick. And we have to also know the signs, I think, because when you don't, it's just kind of hard for some people to express how they feel, and it causes things like that. For example, that Randy staircase of that guy who, she was like a transsexual, which I don't like using that word, but kind of like transgender, had gender dysphoria problems, did have a psychopathy or sociopathy, I'm not exactly sure, probably more sociopathy traits because of what happened in the car accident and stuff. He or she shot 3 other people and killed himself. So yeah, and let's just say that mental health awareness is important. I appreciate the month especially. I didn't really talk about it because, I'm just obviously, like I said, I'm not really keen on sharing myself like that, but I definitely think it's important, and I think that the way to move forward, because a lot of people like to say that millennials are the mental health first world problem types, and there are a lot of millennials and Generation Z, which I don't know if I'm technically a millennial or a Generation Z. I'm somewhere in between, kind of, because I was born between that split, but I think that it's not really the generation's fault. Like, it is the parents somewhat, but it also comes with, there's so many factors to mental health that we just don't know about, and mental illness, and I think that we just need to start paying more attention, thinking better, just kind of being more open to what other people are thinking. And I think that is really important. And yeah, mental health is important. So if you ever feel like harming yourself in any way, just remember that there are people who care about you. Because if you don't think that, because you probably don't, depending on what you have, I guess, there are people who care. And one of my tips is always, if you do end up hurting yourself and self-harm, say, if you're cutting yourself, please try to seek help. In any way, do not post it online, because that can trigger people, turns out, and I really hate to see that stuff happen to people who might actually have serious problems. And just clean it out, make sure that and what I recommend is using bracelets. Don't snap it against the cuts, but snap it against an open area. Not very hard, please, because I don't want you to end up getting yourself injured still, because that's not good. It'll just be a sting. Do that, okay? But don't cut yourself open. Don't kill yourself. You're not worthless, I'm assured of that, unless you are a horrible human being, but generally, if you're depressed, usually bad people that are at least inherently bad don't usually consider themselves to be bad, do they? And I just want people to understand you're not worthless, most likely. You're probably not a bad person, and yeah, people care for you. So there's my positive vibes in this long-ass chat. I won't delete this one this time, I think. I think this is going to be a real video now. Sorry if you guys don't like this talking style. It's not on my main channel, at least, so it's just me talking. So bye, adios. I might make another video on this channel, maybe.